This season famously is for non-blondes.
Welcome to Baggage Claim, an unofficial Jet Lag the Game companion podcast. Today, we're unpacking episode 4 of season 15, Tag All-Stars. I'm Casey.
I'm Kira.
And I'm Jaya.
Kira, what's the shortest amount of time you've spent at a place that took a lot of effort to get to?
I'm thinking about a time that our family went on a vacation to Germany, and we were in Rothenburg, which is this very charming little town. And Casey and I went to probably a church of some kind. It was very little, and there was must have been a bell tower, something very, very tall. And we climbed up to the top of the bell tower, and I remember it being very, very tall, and the stairs were kind of rickety and maybe spiral. I don't remember exactly. It was stone spiral staircase or something like that. My memory is that we needed to hoist ourselves through a little hole in the ceiling to get out. The platform that we were standing on was maybe 1 foot by 1 foot, and it was hurricane level winds.
Oh no.
It was so windy. It was honestly a beautiful view. You could see the whole castle and the gardens and the flowers.
I was very afraid. I realized in that moment that I was afraid of heights.
Worst moment to realize you're afraid of heights.
We took one selfie where Casey is not looking at the camera because she is clutching the railing. And then we immediately went back down.
Jaya, what about you?
I feel like the only things that I could think of for this were miscellaneous hikes that I've been on, where, especially if it's just an out and back hike, you go, you hang out there for a bit, you maybe eat your lunch, and then you go straight back down. And I think the hike that had me fighting for my life the most on the way up, and then we simply went to the top and ate lunch and then went back down, was Old Rag in Northern Virginia.
You're so brave for that.
Notorious mountain. And the first half of that hike was just in the forest. And I was questioning every decision I'd ever made that got me to that point.
Oh my God.
And then we got to the top, we're eating our lunch, and somebody's doing a full photo shoot in a fursuit. Which means that they did that entire hike that had me questioning everything with a fursuit in their backpack, and I love that kind of commitment. But yeah, then we just went straight back down and had dinner.
When I lived in Scotland, I did not have a ton of money to be spending on trains, so I walked or biked almost everywhere in Glasgow, and I used to go on this walk that was maybe an hour and a half one way to this lovely park on the outskirts of Glasgow, and it had a museum and it had a nice little cafe, but importantly for me, it had Highland cows in the pastures there, and baby Highland cows, and I love Highland cows. And so I would walk an hour and a half there, look at the cows for maybe 5 minutes, and then turn around and walk home because at that point I was hungry and tired. Let's jump into the recap. Folks, it's happened. For the first time in jet lag tag history, a team has made it to their end location. Adam and Michelle arrived in Zermatt with a very short transfer to the Cog Railway up to the Gorner Grat Observatory. Despite their curse preventing them from using their phones to navigate, they made the transfer and headed up to the top of the mountain. After a final sprint to the observatory, Adam and Michelle win Tag All-Stars, proving once and for all that in every full season with a woman guest, a woman must win. That's feminism. Yeah. With an outright win midday on game day 2, the game then kicks off into a second round for runner-up. The two other teams keep their coin balances, and Adam and Michelle's zone becomes neutral territory. They also split up the winning team. Sam and Toby draft Michelle, and Ben and Adam reunite with Brian. The boys immediately run off to catch the train back to Zermatt and get saddled with an Amy challenge to find a mystery object that turns out to be a lampshade. The image of 3 men running panicked into a hotel and asking if they have a lamp will haunt me forever. But Brian finally spots a lampshade, and they run back to catch their train to Visp with a hustle I've never seen from Ben. Meanwhile, the chasers also hustle to catch their train following behind the runners. Toby psychoanalyzes Ben and Brian, ultimately concluding that she is expecting maximum rat and goblins from them. But rat mode is easiest to counter by following directly behind, because, as Toby so wisely shares, a rat you can't catch by going in front. Luckily, this team is ready to be exterminators. The runners know that they have to get onto the German train network as fast as possible, so they find a route to Zurich that will set them up well for the next morning. But their coin balance doesn't allow for smooth sailing, so they know they need to be efficient with their challenges. When they pull Bury This card, Brian doesn't hesitate before devoting himself to digging a hole, in his own words, like a dog. But their ideal train to Zurich is delayed into the rest period, so instead they come up with a new plan. A train to Brugg that gets them in 1 minute before the rest period, and a train out of Brugg to Zurich in the morning that leaves exactly at the beginning of the game day. With such a small margin of error, that leaves them with practically no time to get enough coins to take that train to Zurich in the morning. But they have no other choice than to sprint to the co-op and buy a bag of oranges. Their train leaves 2 minutes late, leaving them with only 3 minutes to transfer to their next train and squeeze half a cup of orange juice. To conclude our recap, I've come up with a title to highlight the most important moment of the episode. I really am rooting for Sam and Toby and Michelle as a team to go after the boys, and so I am proposing the title, The Rat Catchers.
Ooh.
Oh, I love that.
That's good.
I also came up with kind of 2 other loose titles, When Life Gives You Oranges, and Just Guys Being Dudes.
I like the second one a lot, especially because in your text to us, you said that they were buying so many lemons.
Honestly,
and
they
I'm
looked
never
like
going to let
lemons.
you live that down.
They looked like lemons.
They looked like lemons.
In
I
world to
I was
me did they
actually
look
really
like
excited
lemons.
for them to have to try to squeeze and maybe even drink just straight lemon.
No, I
But-
also
Okay,
thought
that
they
would
were
have been
lemons.
hilarious.
Do you have any alternate titles?
I have 2 ideas. One of them was based on Adam and Michelle winning, so I had the Little Cog Engine That Could.
Stop, I love
It
that.
really
cute.
pulled through for them. And then the other title suggestion that I have is more general for the episode as a whole, which I have Off the Rails, because I felt like the whole episode was off the rails, and it's a train pun.
Both of those are excellent. Mine is very silly. It is, again, inspired by a text from Casey, and it's, she wank on my dorf till I lose jet lag the game.
Before we move into the Strat Chat, I'm really curious if either of you have names for our new teams, because I was kind of calling them the Rats and the Rat Catchers.
I do
Okay,
like that.
that is excellent.
In my notes, I've been writing them down as the dudes and hashtag we 3 queens.
In my notes, I was calling Ben and Brian Ben, so I just turned it into Babadam. But just while we were about to start recording, my thought for Sam, Toby, and Michelle's team, because previously they were the blondes, now they are one non-blondes.
Which is
Literally
so perfect.
Iconic. So perfect.
There has never been a better name for that team.
They're one non-blondes.
Literally, what's up? This season famously is 4 non-blondes.
So true! Well, with that, I will pass things over to Kira.
Thanks, Casey. Welcome back to the Strat Chat, our segment where we break down the strategy and gameplay of the episode. We've entered into a new round of the game, which means that there is now a new set of rules. For the rest of the season, rather than it being 2v2v2, we're going to be seeing 2 teams of 3 competing against each other, with no more freeze or cloak power-ups, and Adam and Michelle's win zone becomes the neutral zone. So now we are back to 2 teams, but I would argue that we're not quite back to OG tag strategy. For starters, as we've seen so far, the challenges and curses this season are both easier and worth more than they've ever been before. Also, the new starting area is very far away from both win zones, meaning that the runners have quite a lot of ground to make up. I guess my main question here is, what should each of the 2 teams be prioritizing? Do you think that there's going to be a lot of back and forth between the teams, where each team should be prioritizing making it more inconvenient for the other team once they get tagged? Should they be trying to get a ton of coins and full sending to their win location? When do you think rat mode is going to be most beneficial?
I think there probably is going to be more back and forth than we're used to between the two teams, especially because it's not rotating. Like, we've seen 2 or 3 people get a run in a day and a half or in 2 days. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Ben and Adam maybe get 2 runs and Sam and Toby get 1. I do think that because of that, and because the challenges are a bit easier, it would probably be better to prioritize getting into your zone and just sending it as far as you can, rather than trying to bank coins. You can pretty reliably say, oh, these challenges are going to be possible, so we can just pull cards when we need coins, not constantly because just in case. I'm not sure about that, though. I do think that I agree with Toby's read that rat mode is going to be best for them once they're in their win zone, regardless of how deep into it they are. Because, of course, they do need to get to their zone, because right now they're in a neutral territory. Nobody's going to get second place if they end there. So they do need to get to their end zone, but once they get in there, it's probably going to be more about evasion than about reaching your win location.
I mostly agree. I definitely think that Toby was correct in expecting that Ben, Brian, and Adam don't go rat mode until they've entered their win region. And I also agree that it doesn't really make sense to do that before then, because I think their best option is to be on that fastest possible route into their win region. That being said, in this episode, we see them planning through the end of game day 2, but we don't actually see them reach the end. I think they still have some hours left of that second game day where there is definitely a margin for error in terms of some train transfers and challenges and earning enough coins. But I think that once they tip into game day 3, that's still a full game day. That's quite a lot of time. And so I think that they shouldn't go immediately into rat mode and into just trying to evade the chasers at the beginning of game day 3 once they enter their win region, because that's a lot of time to just run around randomly.
Yeah.
I think rat mode is really effective, but it's not forever. Even if they could find a line with low frequency and strand themselves there, that still might only buy them 4 hours, maybe. And so I think that there still should be a goal of trying to go for that win location, knowing that it is a bit of a long shot because they are starting so far, all the way into Adam and Michelle's win region. But I still think that should be overall the aim. And taking some evasive maneuvers definitely makes sense. Mm-hmm. And maybe going a less intuitive way with lower frequency. But I don't think that they should necessarily cross the boundary into their win region and immediately just go haywire.
I do agree with that. And something that what you were just saying made me think of is that Team 1 Non-Blonde has a really big hub in their region. Any train from Dude's Win region into their region, like into Paris, is going to be way faster than the other way around. So I think it is gonna be pretty beneficial for the dudes to be making more evasive maneuvers. I think more so than it would be advantageous for one on blonde to make evasive maneuvers, because they can actually get on high speeds and go fast and just potentially outrun the chasers.
Well, another thought that I'm having is sort of the difference in stakes between the two teams, where I feel like one non-blonde sort of has an advantage at this point. Like you were saying, they have Paris in their win zone, which means that lots of locations have a high-speed train to Paris, and Paris is a hub out towards their win location, which means that it feels like it's going to be easier for one non-blonde to get into their win zone than it is for the dudes to get into their win zone. And also, one non-blonde already has a ton of coins.
Yeah.
And we've seen how easy it is to get more coins. My thought is that in my head, as soon as one non-blonde gets the tag and is able to start their run, barring something crazy happening, it feels like they should be able to full send at least into Paris for quite a while really easily and then make more coins there, which makes me wonder whether a potential strategy for the dudes is to just try to not get caught for the full day and a half that they have left, where there might be a fear that as soon as they give up that control, they might never get ahead again. And so I wonder if that might actually be a strategy of staying in rat mode the whole time. I know right now it's not really a choice. They want to book it, but things keep getting in their way.
They have to get to their win location somehow.
But I sort of wonder whether that's not the worst strategy in the world, because they just need to maintain control. Because if you're the runner, you at least have the ability to make some amount of progress. And so incremental progress over 18 hours of gameplay is very different from full sending for 4 hours and then letting one non-blondes get really far into France and then trying to eke your way out of there.
That's really interesting to me because I do think I agree. If one non-blonde becomes the runner again, they're not losing. Like, they will be set up so well for a strong run, and the timing feels just right that even if they don't make it to their end location, the game would pretty easily end in their region.
I do think I agree to a certain extent, but so far in this game, like, the key takeaway I have gotten is that the further you are into your territory, the harder it is for the next set of runners. I think we saw that really clearly when Sam and Toby were not far into their region at all, and that set up Adam and Michelle for a really efficient run. Mm-hmm. And so, again, I understand just trying to stay in control and stay as the runners for Ben and Ryan and Adam, but if they're doing that and they're only an hour or two into their region,
yes,
I think that has a larger margin of error, where if Sam and Toby and Michelle do manage to tag them, that is an easier route out. Versus if they're able to keep going a little bit more predictably, a little bit more steadily, deeper into their region before starting to just confuse and strand themselves somewhere in closer to the final hours, that feels like it's achievable, but maybe not immediately.
I do agree. I think it's more, to me, about the amount of time it would take to get out of their region rather than the amount of distance that they are in their region.
Yes.
Because if they get deep into their region, but they're in a hub where you can just hop on a high-speed train to Paris, that's going to be a lot worse than being closer to the edge of a region, but at a small station that only has regional trains every 2 hours.
Yes.
I do think I agree with what you're saying a lot, Casey, where it sort of feels like it's a gamble either way, but if the dudes were to do something where they're just trying to maintain their runner control at all costs, then that feels to me like if that plays out, there's a chance that they'll make it into their win zone, which would be good. But if it doesn't work out, there is very little chance that they will win, because one non-blonde will be able to way more easily make it into their win zone. Whereas the alternative is also a gamble, because it's saying maybe they're going to behave more predictably, but in the off chance that something goes wrong and a tag does happen, there is more distance for them to make that up and get another tag. And so it's sort of saying, how confident are they in their ability to stay the runners, and how much of a safety net do they want to build for themselves?
Mm-hmm. There is something to be said there also about the fact that one non-blondes is expecting them to go rat mode, is expecting them to do something weird, and therefore isn't going to really try and cut them off.
Yeah.
That maybe taking the most straightforward route would work for them, because they're not expected to take the most straightforward route. And so even if one non-blondes has a route to cut them off on it, it could be just not obvious that they're taking that eventually. And so they might have an advantage there in being known as the ones who are going to be a bit more chaotic, be a bit less predictable.
That's a great point. And also, especially because it seems like they're going to need to stop for challenges more often, just because their connections haven't been quite as long, and so they can't grind in one place. It also feels like there's a benefit to taking the most direct route, because if one non-blonde decide that they want to try to cut off the dudes and the dudes are leaving a more direct option on the table, then when the dudes are stuck doing challenges, that's giving One on Blonde an opportunity to get in front. Whereas, as we saw with Adam and Michelle, if you're already on the fastest route, you can't get faster than that.
That's true.
Well, with that, I will pass things over to Casey.
Thanks, Kira. In this episode, we cross through the middle of Game Day 2, thus marking halfway in this game of tag. We also finally get to see the third team, Ben and Brian, as runners. So, welcome to Cruising Altitude, a segment where we take a look at the season so far and identify the overarching strategies. So I first want to hear from you, what do you see as each team's strategy as runners?
I think the two teams that have a strategy that really jump out at me are Adam and Michelle, I think are very strong with time management. Yes. And figuring out what the best route is, even if it's not usually the best route. Like, they were talking on the layover about how the route through Visp isn't always the most optimal, but they knew that, and they used their time so well. Michelle had memorized their route already, just in preparation for the cards. They know all the cards very well, and I really think that's where they shined. And, yeah, I guess similarly to what I just said, I think Ben and Brian's biggest strength, and now Ben, Brian, and Adam's biggest strength, is that they're expected to go rat mode. They're expected to do something weird, and so the chasers don't feel super comfortable in their ability or even in trying to get in front of them.
Yeah, and I would say for Sam and Toby, I almost feel like their greatest strength is their understanding of the game and of the other players, where I feel like, I'm thinking even in their first run, when they were standing sort of on the elevated, on the building or wherever they were, looking down to try to, what do they call it? Train snipe?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
When they were train sniping, it feels like they have a deep understanding of what is about to happen next. And if there is any way that they can prepare for it, they have a strategy for it. Where throughout their whole run, it felt like they had a very clear understanding of what the chasers were likely doing, even in predicting which team was going to come get them in various places. It felt like they just had a sense of the other players in a way that the other teams of runners, I haven't seen them rely so much on their ability to read the other teams. And in situations where they have tried to read the other teams and make predictions, it hasn't always been quite so accurate. And so I think that that is really a strength of both Toby and Sam, but maybe particularly of Toby.
Sam, especially when he's paired with Toby, the two of them are so good at figuring out what the other teams might be doing.
Yeah.
Both what their optimal route is and what their most likely route is.
Yes. And also on that, I think that Toby's understanding of previous seasons of the game has really been an asset, where she understands what the previous strategies are, which means that she has a good sense of what strategies are likely to be repeated and by whom. And she also knows what challenges have been failed and just has a really deep understanding of what has previously happened and therefore what could happen again.
That is exactly what I was going to say. And it actually, I think, is kind of related to our initial predictions for the season of what the guests would contribute. I think that we've honestly seen some of the strengths we all identified come through. We've seen Michelle really pulling on her forward thinking and planning. I mean, it seems like she's memorized every card in the deck once again, not only to be prepared for the curse of not using their phone, but also we see even in this episode when she was a chaser and they receive the coordinates that the other team has buried their card, she remembers the nuances of that challenge without even looking at it. Yeah. I think that preparation is...
she knew the exact amount of coin.
Which is helpful because it means that you know how far they can get from that.
And I think similarly, we really see Toby being quite measured about strategy and not jumping into anything that might be higher risk. And I also think that we see Brian kind of thinking outside the box, even when he is a chaser, thinking about going to the airport, taking a flight, trying to do those things that are not straightforward. And that kind of leads me into my next question, which is, what do you see as each team's strategy as chasers?
Well, I think we've seen Ben and Brian be the chasers the most. And I think their strategy as chasers is quite clear, where they want to be the next runner. They are going to...
At whatever cost.
Right. They are going to make the selfish decision in the moment in order to get the catch. Whereas I feel like Adam and Michelle are more likely to back down based on sort of maintaining good relations. And so it seems like, based on the way the show is edited, it feels like Adam and Michelle are more likely to just sort of accept that Ben and Brian are going to bamboozle them. Whereas it feels like Sam and Toby's strategy as chasers is to still behave optimally for themselves, but they want to play more conservatively in order to make sure that someone makes the catch. And so it feels like they are not willing to be bamboozled, but also they're not going to sabotage the other team by behaving solely selfishly. Like, they also could have taken the flight, but the consequence of them taking the flight and having no other team of chasers be there, like if the flight had been canceled or something had gone wrong, that was too big of a risk to justify their selfishness. And so they decided to take a still good for them option that is more conservative.
If neither team of chasers was trying themselves to get the catch, strategically it would have been better for Sam and Toby to take the flight because they were just barely making it to Paris at the end of the day, and for Ben and Brian to take the train down, which was safer but slower because they were in Paris much earlier than Sam and Toby were.
Yeah.
But of course, Ben and Brian would have simply never gone for that because it would have put them in a slightly disadvantaged position. And, I mean, I do think it worked out for them, where had Adam and Michelle not made it to their end locations, they would have been the ones to make that catch.
Yeah.
Ben and Brian, as chasers, at least in the 3-team tag dynamic, are way more likely to take the really high-risk, high-reward option because they are so adamant about getting that next catch.
Which is also interesting to me because I feel like in previous seasons of tag, and also just in previous seasons of round-robin games in general, we've seen a lot of building of strategies based on previous rounds, where especially in Snake, we saw that the strategy really changed over the course of the game as the players saw what worked and what didn't work in previous iterations. We also definitely saw that across hide-and-seek rounds, even within the same season. And I feel like we're not seeing that quite so much in this season so far, and of course now the game is shifting slightly, so we'll have to see how that plays out. But at least between the first run and the second run, it felt like Ben and Brian really didn't change tactics, even though it didn't work for them the first time. So in the first run, when they were chasers, they were trying to be the aggressive ones, always trying to be the ones to make the catch, always trying to be the one to go for it, and it didn't pay out for them at all. And yet going into the second round, they were still playing high risk, high reward, saying, well, we need it to pan out for us. It is not worth it to play it safe, even if they flop.
I mean, I do think in the first round, it not working out was just based on the fact that they misread what they thought the aggressive tactic was, based on the fact that neither team of chasers knew what Sam and Toby were doing.
Yeah.
Like, they had no idea that they had been cursed and a train had been delayed or canceled or whatever. And so their read on what the aggressive tactic was just turned out to be wrong. And then they just turned out to get really unlucky once they finally did it.
Yeah.
It could have been a bit of a fallacy to think, okay, well, it didn't work last time, but it will work this time, to figure out what the most aggressive strategy is and keep trying to execute on it the same way that we have been. Because it ended up working for them in the second run, but if it hadn't, that would have, I think, said more about their ability to figure out what the aggressive tactic was and less about their ability to execute upon it.
Yeah.
After reflecting on the 3 teams of 2, going into the rest of the season, we now have 2 teams of 3. So Michelle has joined Toby and Sam, Adam has joined Ben and Brian. What do you think each of them will add to those existing teams?
I mean, here's my unserious answer, is that they're both just going to add a sense of panic.
Well, I was going to say, I think that one thing that Michelle is going to add is maybe a sense of drive of being like, guys, we can do this. Not that Sam and Toby didn't have that before, but as we've discussed, they tend to have a more conservative strategy and very level-headed, very calculated. And so I wonder if Michelle will have the push of saying, no, we can do this more risky strategy. We are physically capable of doing it. And then on the Adam side of things, I feel like I would say one of Adam's greatest strengths is being able to identify the problem. Across the seasons, I feel like when he runs into roadblocks, literal or figurative, he's able to identify what the problem is going to be. And typically he's able to find a way around it. So in this episode, we've seen that he is describing very clearly for their team what the problem is. Yeah. There's a train delay. There's a train cancellation. We don't have the coins. This is the situation. And I feel like that actually is going to play really well off of Ben and Brian, because I think we've seen in Connect 4 and even in Battle for America, Brian in particular is really good at coming up with weird solutions to problems. And so I think that having that pairing of someone who can really articulately say, this is what's going wrong, and then Brian, who is typically able to say, well, here's something we can do, I think that that will be very beneficial.
Yeah, Ben and Brian are really good at the what if we did this.
Yes.
And I think Adam is really going to bring a here's the problem and here's the solution that we're picking out of the list that you guys have provided.
Well, I'm excited to see how the team dynamics change next episode, but I will pass things over to Jaya.
Thanks, Casey. Okay, so of course, because the Gornograd Observatory was pivotal in this episode, our game simply had to be about Swiss astronomy. And while doing some research, I was reminded that Fritz Zwicky, one of the most esoteric and pretty legendary astronomers, at least in my mind, was Swiss. So today, instead of coming up with some convoluted game about historic observations done at Gornograd that would have only been interesting to me and like 2 listeners, we're sticking with the classics for a train of lies about this absolutely bonkers man. Just to give you a lay of the land before we jump in, here's a list of some of Zwicky's notable accomplishments as an astronomer. He was one of the first people to propose supernovas as giant explosions at the end of a star's life, and to state that neutron stars were the remnants left over from that, both of which we still hold to be true. Notably, at least to me, Zwicky was the guy who first postulated the existence of dark matter, something which was later persuasively shown to be real by Vera Rubin.
Whoa.
I actually had to cite his paper in German about it for my undergrad thesis, which was about dark matter, because in talking about the history of dark matter, I had to reference Zwicky, and I went down a citations rabbit hole that ended up with, like, insane papers in German that I couldn't read and had to Google Translate or send to a friend.
My God.
Finally, I personally know his name best from a catalog of galaxies that he published with colleagues at Caltech, and another one which he published with his wife at Caltech in the 1960s. One of the recent telescope proposals I wrote actually included a galaxy that we still call 3 Zwicky 35.
Whoa.
This dude is everywhere in galaxy and stellar astronomy. So you guys get the idea now. The dude was brilliant, but he was also, as I said, very esoteric, and known as quite an unfavorable curmudgeon. So which of these 4 stories about insane shit that he said is a lie? First, Zwicky used to call people he didn't like, typically the other astronomers at the observatory, but also his students, spherical bastards. Why, you might ask? Well, as he explains, quote, because they were bastards, no matter which way one looked at them.
Whoa.
That's
That's raw as hell.
I know. It's so funny.
absolutely savage to the soul.
The effect of this was so far-reaching that when a group of grad students went to his house for dinner, his wife called into the house saying, "Fritz, the bastards are here."
Oh my God. Iconic.
Second, during a night of observing at Mount Wilson in Southern California, the turbulence in the atmosphere was really harshing his vibe and hindering their ability to get good data. About this, Zwicky told his assistant to fire a gun out through the telescope slit, in the hopes that it would help smooth out the turbulence.
What?
It did not help, but at least they tried. Third, Zwicky was an accomplished alpine climber, a love which he developed while teaching at the Gornograd Observatory as a graduate student.
Relevant!
He frequently showed up to labs late, having trekked up the mountain in all kinds of conditions, and constantly attempted to convince his students that it would be fun and not dangerous at all to join him. While his lateness to observing labs is unverified, it is known that his treks with students only halted after one of them was struck by lightning on their way up.
No! Oh no.
Finally, Zwicky, and I quote, considered the possibility of rearranging the universe to our own liking. He first discussed it publicly at a lecture in 1948, in which he spoke of changing planets or relocating their orbits within the solar system. But then he got really into it in the 60s, when he considered how the whole solar system could be moved like a giant spaceship. He suggested achieving this by firing pellets into the sun to produce asymmetrical fusion explosions, and by this means that Alpha Centauri could be reached within 2,500 years. Back-of-the-envelope calculations for this imply that we would be traveling about 671 million miles per hour, which means that you could do a full equatorial circumnavigation in just over 1/10 of a second at this speed.
That's how fast I run.
So which one of those is a lie?
So first of all, I love this guy. The fact that 3 of these are true is awesome. And I am really relying on all of the scientists that I know and their personalities. And I'll explain. I think spherical bastards is 1000% true.
Me too.
That feels incredibly true to my experience of scientists and their students.
Real.
And it feels like an affectionate term, honestly.
Well, the fact that he's saying that back and forth with his wife, I'm like, oh yeah, I think this feels extremely familiar.
Yeah, that feels very true to me. I also think that firing a gun at the air is, like, wild, and it's not based in science at all, but does feel like something that a very frustrated academic in the middle of the night would do. That being said, this last one about rearranging the solar system.
Jeez Louise.
The only reason that I am leaning towards that being true, well, I'm going to say 2 reasons. One, you said this was in the 60s, so he was probably on drugs. The other piece that I would add is Feynman, the physicist, had this whole theory called one electron theory that kind of started as a joke.
Not one electron.
It kind of started as a joke. Yeah, so Richard Feynman was a physicist. He worked on the Manhattan Project. He won a Nobel Prize, and he played the bongos, and he wrote the most devastatingly romantic letter to his wife after she passed away that makes me cry every time I read it. That's neither here nor there. But he had this whole theory that started as a joke and then kind of was a little bit not a joke.
Devolved.
About one electron theory where everyone in the world shares one electron and it's just moving really fast.
we can't say that it's not true, because orbitals are just probability clouds.
I just feel like that sounds like crazy, but not outside of the realm of scientist crazy. And I think for me, the reason I'm leaning towards the student getting struck by lightning as the lie is because based on the bastards comment, I feel like he wouldn't be inviting students to hike with him. I feel like he would be relishing in his solitude of hiking alone.
Oh, that's a great point. I was leaning towards the shooting a gun out of the telescope one as the lie, because even though I could see something like that being true, I feel like even the rearranging the universe feels somewhat, I mean, obviously it's bananas, but at least I could see him believing it to be feasible. Whereas the shooting a gun at turbulent atmosphere feels like he knows it would never work and it's just an expression of frustration. And I feel like he seems like such an incomprehensible but like deeply scientific man that he wouldn't make a show of trying to do something to affect the world if he knows it's not going to work.
Okay, so Casey, are you locking in the hiking one?
Yes.
And Kira, you're gonna lock in the shooting a gun out the telescope slit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Casey, you are correct.
Ooh.
I made up all of that besides the fact that Zwicky was an accomplished alpine climber.
Not the fact I thought it would be.
And no, apparently he really liked alpine climbing. And the reason I thought of lightning was because the most cited paper on ADS about the Gornegrot Observatory is about a storm that happened near there, not about astronomy done at the observatory.
That is very interesting.
Well, great job. This was fun. I had a blast reading all about this absolutely bonkers man. And Casey, I'll pass it back to you.
Great. And now we will move into our rosebud and thorns. Kira, do you want to get us started?
Sure. My rose is that finally Toby and Michelle got to unionize.
Woohoo!
I know on the layover, Sam said that he knew fans had been asking for that since the beginning, and so they were like morally obligated to deliver during the drafting process. But as one of the fans who has been asking for this since the beginning, I really do thank them for delivering. I'm thrilled. My thorn is that there wasn't really any kind of real reunion at the Matterhorn, which I was a little bummed about. It was so beautiful, and it was nice to see all 6 of them together, but then they didn't really have any time, and I was sad with Michelle that they never got a good picture.
Yeah.
And my bud is that specifically I'm really excited to see Brian as a runner. I feel like throughout the game so far, he's been really patiently waiting his turn. But already this run, we can see that he is so locked in, both with the physical challenges and with the strategic planning. And I think that's going to be really interesting as a dynamic playing off of Ben and Adam, who I think are already very confident in their jet lag abilities. And so having Brian, who has these new, fresh ideas and a lot of confidence just being raring to go, I think that's going to be really exciting.
Jaya, what about you?
My rose is yay, woohoo, yippee, and also wahoo. My team has won, and I'm very proud of them. My thorn is that I also wish there had been a bit more time and footage of the teams in Gornegrot, because that turnover just felt a little anticlimactic to me. And it makes perfect sense that Ben, Adam, and Brian had to sprint off to get right back on the train that Sobi had just gotten off of, and that the game simply had to continue. But I still would have loved a bit of footage of maybe Adam and Michelle recovering from their unnecessary run and celebrating a little bit, or just seeing Ben and Brian reach them rather than them all just suddenly being there. And my bud, already I feel like more of the nitty-gritty of Ben, Brian, and Adam's decision-making is like getting filmed and being used as footage compared to usual. And maybe that's just due to there being less time for them to be like, okay, we've figured something out, we're going to sit down and tell you guys about it. Or maybe it's because they're just filming more organically during their run because there's more of them to film. So I've really enjoyed how immersive their run felt so far. It was so chaotic and felt very fitting to like their energy as they move along this 0-minute transfers always track. I'm really excited to see how that turns out for them.
Yeah.
Honestly, I agree with everything that you both have said. My rose is that I think we really saw Brian lock in during this episode in a way that I don't think we've ever seen him before. He was running, he was digging, he was strategizing. I think that I have really liked his previous seasons because he brings a very funny energy, but I had not really seen him be so dedicated to winning before, and I think here we really see how much he cares, which was really powerful. I agree with the thorns of such a quick turnover. It would have been nice to see Adam and Michelle get to celebrate a bit more and to see all of them in one place. But I will actually say that my real thorn was the shot of that orange dropping on the ground in the co-op and rolling around. There was something so
funny.
They're making sure it's going to be so easy to juice. They're rolling it on the floor first. It's going to be so yummy.
This is strategy for when they have to juice it.
They're going to juice it just by throwing it on the floor.
It It felt like, and maybe this is me projecting, but it felt like when you're already having a bad day and you have to run an errand and then you drop something or like your bag splits or something and you're like,
Yeah.
no! That's what it felt like to me. My bud is that I am very excited for Team One Non-Blonde, especially for Toby and Michelle's antics, but also Sam is there too.
God, that's funny.
And with that, thank you for waiting at Baggage Claim. Let us know your thoughts on socials at baggageclaimpod or over email, which is in the episode description. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a comment or give us a follow. We'll see you next week at the runner-up Baggage Claim. The former Miss America has your luggage and a bouquet of flowers for you. Goodbye!
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
There was literally a Polar Express reference.
Literally,
That was
this is what we're
crazy.
here for.
Craziest thing
I've
ever.
never felt better.
We talk about the Polar Express every single recording session.
And every
It's
single
unreal.
time it is cut.
I know. I think that every time it should be cut, but also the audience is really missing out on our 45-minute long conversations about the Polar Express and Federal Ruffman.
Look, it's really relevant because it is presumably kind of free public transportation all the way to the North Pole.
I know, it's phenomenal public
It's like-
transportation.
The opposite of Arctic Escape.
It's powered by magic, so it's a renewable resource. Actually, that's not true.
It's
definitely
powered by coal, famously.
Wait. Well, Casey is gone. We should sing her happy birthday.
Yes, okay, ready?
What I will say is that I was wearing my headphones that whole time.
No!
Thank you for singing happy birthday.